Hi everyone, today we're diving in head first into some of my weird thoughts about makeup. This is just a small snapshot because basically no one must ever know
how unhinged I am.
If you've ever had a slightly offbeat thought as you're blending your eyeshadow, or maybe you prefer to use a certain brush on a given day of the week, for example, then honestly, you are in the right place and we definitely understand each other. If this has never happened to you, then that's fine. Rest assured, I am absolutely not judging you, as long as you don't judge me. So watch on. False eyelashes is where I'd like to kick off. This is something that I love on other people. I like the full lash. I think it looks lovely. But the ones I'm most attracted to are those individual lashes, the ones that you can just sort of put on the corner of your eye for a kind of sexy little flutter of an evening. I suppose my fear is that if I eventually learn how to put them on properly, then I will end up convincing myself that they look really nice on me, and I'll end up kind of looking in the mirror and trying to surprise myself in the mirror so that I can see how nice they look, but that actually the rest of the world will be looking at me and thinking, her eyelashes just look like she's got caterpillars hanging off a branch, and that I would just look ridiculous. So I suppose the way I feel about false lashes is kind of the way I feel about a threesome, which is, I respect your right as a consenting adult to partake in this. And in a way, I kind of salute and I'm in awe of your courage and kind of communal spirit, as it were. But it's kind of not for me. It just feels like I'm just not cut out for the stickiness of it. And also, I would probably just get the whole positioning wrong and it would just be an unmitigated disaster. So I suppose, all in all, the whole thing isn't for me. But in my heart, I know I'm missing out. Now, this leads me onto spiritual matters. Actually, it doesn't. I just needed a link. I want to talk to you about going to church. When I go to church, I tend to make sure that my makeup is quite muted and quite respectful, of course. Typically, I avoid wearing a bright lipstick. However, there are plenty of times, partly because of where I am, that I'll wear something that's a bit more sober. I might wear something that's kind of all navy or a sort of a darker colour. And in those instances, a red lip kind of really goes. Now, I'm not really a red lipstick kind of person, but there are a couple that I do enjoy wearing. But I have increasingly started to feel uncomfortable about wearing red because here's the thing. At the pearly gates, when I've finally expired and exhausted my shelf life, and exhausted my family as well, it may well be that the big guy looks at me and says,
Ho, you're the one with the red lipstick and the blue undertone. No, that didn't suit you.
Now, I do know that red doesn't really suit me that much, but maybe it's not just me. Maybe there's a higher power that agrees with me. And it could well be that once I'm at the pearly gates, he says,
send her down to the other place, because we know the little guy with a pitchfork really likes red.
Now, that's not going to work out well for me because, let's be honest, I need all the help I can get. And that is why I don't wear red in church. And now on to what might be a bit controversial, actually, in that I don't like to wear shimmery eyeshadow outside of a city. Now, there is a kind of basis for this. When I was very young and my now husband and I had just started going out, he invited me to the very north of England into a very kind of rural environment. It was a kind of a small village, really. And we were out with a big group of people having a really lovely time. Everybody was super friendly. It was just a good laugh. It was just absolutely lovely. It really was. I was wearing what at that time was, what I wore, which was, some eyeliner. I was definitely wearing some shimmery eyeshadow, because this is the whole point of this segment. And yeah, it was a kind of foolish makeup for, a young person in their early 20s. And I immediately felt like Dolly Parton walking amongst the Amish, because nobody else was wearing any makeup. Now, we were all quite young, so, it's not really to do with the location. I think it was partly to do with our youth. But I definitely felt awkward, and I kind of felt like my makeup was kind of throbbing and pulsating through the countryside, and that the sheep were kind of looking at me, and maybe the cows as well, if they were there, but they'd have probably been sitting down and they might not have seen me. But even so, even as I'm saying that, I'm thinking, cows have really lovely long lashes. This is what I mean. You see, my mind just kind of wanders. Anyway, the point is that since then, I think I have learned that feeling of me feeling very kind of out of place is not a good feeling for me. So in any kind of rural environment, and by that I mean probably a combination of not very good cell phone connection, maybe once a week the shops shut early on, say, a Wednesday or something, but certainly the overwhelming factor has to be that the majority of people don't wear makeup, and therefore I would feel left out. And that is why I don't wear shimmery eyeshadow outside of a city, any city in any country. I remember when we did a long trip in China it was like 14 or 15 years ago. It was actually the year of the London Olympics. And we were in Beijing, I was wearing my makeup, it was all absolutely fine. We were then travelling for a few hours outside of China, going to visit all sorts of places. And I remember being in the car and with my finger, like scrubbing off the eyeshadow. Now, I don't think the rural Chinese population gave two hoots as to whether a silly tourist woman from the UK or from anywhere else was wearing eyeshadow. The point is that I am the one that felt awkward. Although, when we went to see the Terracotta Army, I did notice that each one of those statues, bit of a cheeky little blend there on the old eyeshadow, I noticed, had been factored in when they had restored them, but that is another matter. Sometimes when I'm bored, my mind meanders and I end up wondering what the person that I'm interacting with would look like with a bit of makeup, or maybe just different makeup, So an example of that is parent-teacher meetings, which for me are a kind of rich source of boredom. I can say that now, actually, because I now don't have school-age children anymore, to my relief, and in fact to our mutual relief. So I always used to take a cup of tea with me, but when that cup of tea had finished, I was then at the mercy of the tea that the school would lay on, which was always weak and willing and just was not tasty. And also the snacks were never any good. So I was tired, I was hungry, and I was bored. And then my mind wanders. So I would end up looking at the history teacher and thinking, oh, that's nice. You're teaching the 1950s. That kind of look would look really good with you, a nice bold lip and so on. So that would be that would kind of get me through. That would kind of get me through the evening. My boredom would kind of morph into my real interest, which is makeup. It happens to me at work. I might ask a question and the person, instead of giving me just a short answer and actually answering my question, ends up giving me a really forensic answer. I'm not interested. They're talking past the close. I'm now thinking whether that person would be, improved with a bit of tinted moisturiser. So I do end up thinking, oh, with those crocs and that man bun, actually, you would look good with something that was a nice dewy finish and maybe a berry stain or something. And I suppose it also happens when I'm dealing with professionals as well. So, you know, with my accountant, I might think, actually, that's a really bad example. I don't think that with my accountant. I think my accountant would probably be as surprised as me to find that I think that maybe his look would be improved with a nice kind of shifty duochrome Natasha Denona situation in maybe a blue or a bright green. I don't think that he would, I think that's just a bad example, although it would be quite funny if he was watching this video. It would surprise us both. On to the next one. Something that I've thought about recently is that paranoia is basically my best makeup friend. So when I was growing up, it was quite a sort of common thing to hear other people's parents say to their typically daughters, but I might be wrong, let me know in the comments, "Oh, you need to make sure you always wear clean underwear in case there's an accident." Now, I never really understood this, and I recently was thinking about it. I don't know why, just something reminded me of it. And firstly, I kind of want to say, how dirty are you? Do some laundry. I mean, that's just a weird thing to say to somebody. But more importantly, I think the way to be prepared for an accident is actually to have a very soft makeup so you look your best. So I've sort of long thought actually, tubing mascara is a sensible option because that comes off really easily. And then maybe a nice kind of monochromatic look, blusher, and then just putting a little bit on the eyelids and just highlighting one's face gently. And then maybe just a nice, your lips but better gloss of some sort. So that seems to me the best way to mitigate in the event of an accident, which actually brings me on to my next point. An added benefit of this kind of emergency, accident-friendly makeup is if I was caught on camera for whatever reason, I would at least look presentable. So, for example, a few years ago, they changed the speed limit values on a road very near us, and they changed it from 30 miles an hour to 20. I had not been paying enough attention, so of course I got caught speeding at the original speed, which was a 30-mile limit. Now, what happened was, my husband and I were going through the post, we were opening everything, and he happened to open my envelope, and so he was opening it, had a look, read the letter, read the fine, looked at the documentation, and there were, I think, 4 photographs. I mean, it was obviously clearly me because I was the person driving the car. But he looked at it, and this is my husband, remember, not me. He looked at it, he looked at the photographs and said, "Your hair looks amazing." And actually, sure enough, I'd had the sunroof open, and in those days, because I've only had short hair for the last kind of 9 months, hitherto I've always had sort of long, way past way past shoulder length hair, mid-arm length hair. And the camera had caught me in 4 different moments with my hair kind of blowing in the wind. And in my imagination, when I looked at those photographs, I thought, oh, I look like Farrah Fawcett Majors in the 70s, or actually more like, Margot Robbie in The Wolf of Wall Street. Honestly, listen, just because I'm paranoid, it doesn't mean I'm not delusional, but, this is my gig. So I was like, oh, it looks amazing. Look at my hair. You're right. My hair looks really good. But actually, that taught me a valuable lesson, which was be prepared, because even if I'm going to get caught by the police, I should at least look presentable. So my emergency makeup is a bit like, making sure my hair's kind of presentable or just at least vaguely clean, In an emergency and in a moment of a, kind of snapshot, I will at least look halfway decent. Am I the only one who thinks these thoughts? Come on, tell me you've had some weird makeup thoughts as well. Because actually, from my point of view, it would be really lonely if I was the only person standing in the middle of the desert without anybody around. I mean, that would be bad. Now, I also know that in the real world, I can present like quite a normal person. So only you know the truth. But I do think it's time for you to fess up. There must have been something along this video where you just thought, yes, well that reminds me of, in which case, let me know down below. And if there's enough weird and wonderful makeup ideas, then I can put it in another video anonymously. Don't worry, as I said, this is a safe space. It's absolutely fine. Please subscribe and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.